Why, hello, and welcome to this interview that we have set up exclusively here on Book Lovers TV. So pleased that you have decided to drop by for this very special interview. Today on deck, I want to introduce you to author Renee Rose. Renee, welcome to the interview. I really appreciate you being here. I know that you are an author of a particular type of book. What is the name of the book we're going to chat about today?
Yeah, the name of the book is King of Diamonds.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what type of book is it?
It is a steamy romance. And it's a mafia romance.
A mafia romance, right? And that's I just finished reading the book this morning. I loved it, and I don't usually love this kind of book, but the level of storytelling and the level of detail that went into the storytelling really made that whole world come alive to me. So the thing that I said, I don't generally read this kind of book because it's a steamy romance. But let folks know, what do you mean when you say, or when I say, a steamy romance? What is a steamy romance essentially?
Yeah, so in romance land, we have sort of defined. So erotica is when the whole thing is just sex. And then erotic romance is when there's a plot, but if you took away the sex is part of the plot. So if you took away the sex, the plot would fall apart, or it's not. So that might be 50 Shades of Grey, something like that. And then steamy romance is you could take out the sex and still have a story, but the sex happens to be steamy. So that's where I sort of started with more erotica, and I've kind of worked my way to the mainstream with steamy romance.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for just a second. Tell me kind of how you did dip a toe in this whole erotica, steamy romance world.
So it's funny. I have a degree in creative writing, but when I went to college, genre fiction, which romance is a part of, sci-fi, mystery, all of that is considered genre fiction. We weren't allowed to write it. It wasn't considered highbrow enough. And it was kind of, very looked down on. And so I didn't write it. I didn't read it. Flash forward years later, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, I have a plane trip, and I'm at a good friend of mine's house, and I said, do you have a book I can read this is before Kindles, of course. Do you have a book I could read for the flight? And she handed me a Jenny Cruzy novel. Jenny Cruzy is a wonderful romance author. And my friend is very well-educated, intelligent person. And I was like, you read romance? It just sort of surprised me. She's like, oh, just read it. You're going to like it. And she was right. I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with romance as a genre. And I think one of the things that just really appeals to me is it's feel good. There's a happily ever after every time. And then not to mention the sex. That feels good too, right? It feels good to read about hot sex. So to me, that became my favorite thing. And so then I started trying to write my own. And then it was not long after that 50 Shades of Grey hit. And I was like, oh, that's my gig. I really like that particular dominant brand of hero. So that's where I went.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that I sort of thought was interesting, is that it seems like this type of romance, especially this book that we're chatting about, and I'm maybe your other books too, we could talk about it, but it seems like King of Diamonds is very much a sort of a dominant male driven story and sex line almost. So tell me about that. I mean, what is so sexy about the dominant male?
I think that's biology, really. There's that survival of the fittest thing, right? So on a biological level, we're still looking for the caveman who's going to be able to help us survive. And so that's going to be the toughest, strongest, or the provider. So that's why the billionaire trope is also huge. It's the provider, the protector. And so, of course, the alpha male fits all of that. And that's why you find so many alpha males in romance novels. There's some biology there that appeals to us. And then it's about how do you make it palatable? Because we don't necessarily want the caveman who drags us by the hair anymore, but we kind of still do. So it's how do you make it work? Well, maybe you set it in Mafia land where they can be a little tougher because that world works. Or you set it in historical times, or you set it in sci-fi land where humans are slaves, or so that they can act out these sort of alpha male fantasies and have it still be palatable.
Interesting. Gotcha. So hadn't really actually thought about it from the perspective of having basically a world where that is more common or acceptable almost. So is that what kind of led you into sort of bringing in the whole mafia part of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely like, I love Mafia. I was a Sopranos fan. And I think part of it is this like world, you know, where they have a different set of rules, and there's still heroism there, but it's like the dark side of heroism, right? So there's like the protector vibe, and there's the provider vibe, but and there's also like the soldier, the command, you know, there's like this command structure of like rules and following the soldiers, but then it's also like the totally dark underbelly, right? So there's like they're the rebel to normal society. So there's like this excitement level there. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of Mafia.
Yeah, that one of the things I wanted to do now is so that folks can kind of get a better taste for the King of Diamonds. Is I want to run the trailer for this book so that you can kind of see kind of where it goes. And I think it'll tee up the rest of our conversation very nicely. So let me go ahead and do that right now, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Awesome. I absolutely really like this book so much. As a matter of fact, I guess one of the reasons why it resonated so closely with me is because I grew up in a predominantly Italian family. And that's one of the other things I wanted to chat with you about is the research that went into this book. Is, you know, it's just like, wow, it sounds like she's created this world and it's true to life. And how did you do that? How were you able to research the mafia, or did you? I mean, or maybe you're a mafia princess yourself. I don't know.
Definitely not a mafia princess. No, I mean, I've definitely, like, I watch mafia movies and TV. I like that. And then I researched, like, just to have the Italian flavor, I threw in, you know, like both the endearments and the curse words are Italian. So I would look up that sort of thing to kind of filter, like throw those in. And then I do sometimes I have to look up like crime, you know, I don't know much about crime. So I have to look up like, well, what, and I, you know, and again, it's like I'm making it palatable. So I have these men, but I don't want them like in the sex slave trade or, you know, something that just like you could never forgive them for. So I have, these guys are more, it's just like money laundering, you know, things that seem pretty okay, right? So it's, but trying to figure out like, oh, well, how does money laundering work, and how do these, you know, what happens, and that's fun for me.
Yeah, awesome. You know, the cool thing too you seem to really weave in this story is not just the mafia, because as I said, it really kind of rings true. Whether I don't know. I mean, even growing up in an Italian family, we were always told, "Hey, stay away from those guys," you know. And by the way, that was a very, very direct order from Grandpa. But it not only did it seem to you that you got that right, but also the nuances and the subtleties that you put into how you describe how Vegas business is done, or how business in Vegas is done. Tell us a little bit about that, because again, that brings another sort of level of truth and enjoyment, frankly, to reading the story.
It just happened that it ended up being in Vegas. So I was plotting the story while I was at a book conference in Vegas, and so my agent at the time had said, "Why don't you set it in Vegas?" And I was like, indeed, why not? Especially because, like, I love the Ocean's 11 movies with the casino heists. So like this whole casino, this like glitzy, sexy casino with the powerful men that run it was sort of in my head from those movies. Vegas ended up being a perfect place. And the series I ended up calling Vegas Underground, although they don't, some of them end up in Chicago because the family started in Chicago. But I love Vegas as the backdrop to all of this because Vegas does seem like that kind of place where anything could happen and everything does happen, right?
That's super cool. And again, it fits within sort of the context of the entire story. The really kind of interesting thing is how your character is Sandra Simonson, right? How basically, because you are in Vegas and because you are part of this mafia world, you can be sort of enveloped into this world and being like completely cared for, right? In a hotel suite, which a lot of the story, or much of the story, takes place there. So I mean, I completely get that. But one of the things that another sort of wrinkle, and I don't want to give it away to people because it's a really cool thing that kind of takes us through the story. But one thing that does happen is there is a marriage contract. And I'm not going to say between who, but let's just call it a mafia marriage contract. Is that a real thing? I mean, is that like really happen?
I don't know if it's a real thing in mafia romance, which it is. There's bratva like they all kind of fall into mafia, like organized crime romance, which is a total thing. It's a trope. And there's bratva, which is the Russian mafia, and there's Italian. But it comes up frequently. And a lot of the themes in mafia romance are similar to Regency or medieval romance. So that, of course, the arranged marriage, it was huge, both Regency and medieval times. So it's a trope that readers love or authors love. It's a great way to throw people together. And in this case, the arranged marriage isn't. I don't know if I want to give it away either, but it's not those two don't end up together. But often romance authors will put these two together. They're at odds with each other. They didn't want to be married. And then, of course, they find love. So it's a trope that gets used a lot.
Let's step back for a second. And we haven't really talked a whole lot about sex. And I want to talk about sex because that really does sort of play throughout this book. And what sort of inspired you to write the sex scenes the way that you did, and make them almost too believable, actually. It's too believable.
Well, I'm definitely a fan of like the hot dominant sex. So there's a lot of, and one of my favorite trope, like I've probably written 100 novels with this trope, is what we call the abduction seduction, which is sort of what happens in this one. It's more of like the Viking romance, right? Where he throws her over the shoulder, she's abducted, and rather than the arranged marriage, it's the abduction seduction. So in this case, there's these moments where there's this element of course, there's never an actual rape. There's no, but there's this element of like, I'm going to take this. Not I'm going to ask, but I'm going to take. But of course, we're showing consent through like, he waits for consent. There's, he's looking for signs of arousal. There's like that sort of thing. He's not a total jerk, but that line, I walk that line. That's my favorite line to walk, is that it's close to being forced, or it's, he's that pushy. He's that confident. He's that.
Yeah, I mean, your main character is Nico, and definitely very, very pushy. But that was the other thing that struck me about the character and the story, that there was continual consent going on. It wasn't just once, twice, thrice. It kept on. It actually was almost a sub theme to the whole romance, actually. And I thought that was interesting in light of the fact that this is some mafia guy,
In my opinion, and there's definitely authors who write darker than I do in this genre, but in my opinion, the consent is important for making sure our hero is redeemable by the end, right? So he starts off kind of a jerk, but we want him to be brought to his knees by love. And so there definitely are the moments where you're like, he's pushing it too hard, but there's always like a discussion again, yeah, they back off, they figure it out.
The other thing that kind of strikes me about Sandra is that sweet person. Why? Why that? I mean, what's the idea behind making Sandra kind of as sweet as she is, and still works? I mean, it still fits within the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, so this is another thing that like we play with, sometimes you want the like sassy, which her cousin Corey, who has the next book, is the sassy, like, don't screw with me type of heroine. And then sometimes it's the like, it really is the old theme of like, they soften the monster through love. So my books are not for the girls who love Cinderella growing up. Mine are the Beauty and the Beast lovers, right? So it's the like, he captures her, he's a beast, and then she's so sweet and loving and kind, it changes him and he comes out the prince.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really remarkable. And one of the other things that I did think that was really interesting toward the end of the book, where and once again, I don't want to give this away, but let's just say that Nico gets tested in a couple of different ways. Can you speak to why you included this test for Nico?
I think I wanted to show that, yeah, so the public declaration of love, or the choosing love over family, or that's important, especially if a heroine's been put through something, right? So he kind of put her through the ringer, and now he's got to choose, like, he has to show or prove to her and us as the reader that he's choosing her over everything else. And so there's that test. What's funny about that test, it's his older brother, who's very much a jerk in the scene, like just absolutely jerk, who does the testing. And then because of what I write and who my readers are, I got so many messages saying, "Oh, when does Junior get a book?" So of course Junior does end up. I had to redeem him, which was a little hard because that scene was a little cruel.
For sure, absolutely, it was. And I guess I'll ask the question: is Junior going to get a book?
Junior has a book. He had she was a very feisty heroine. He didn't have the soft, sweet heroine. He had a very feisty heroine to tame him.
Apropos, I think.
Yes, and it was a good one. Really, that book I think is a favorite of the series.
And what's the name of that book?
That is Joker's Wild.
Joker's Wild. Interesting. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to also cover is the style in which you write, or the sort of the setup of how you tell the story, because that was another thing that kept me reading, and that was sort of each character got their own section to say what they wanted to say about what happened in a particular scene, or what is happening in a particular scene, and it kind of rang of, he said, she said, which I think really worked in a big way. I enjoyed that from my read of the book. But why did you choose that particular style of writing for this book?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the alternating points of view between the male and female in a romance. And I think that it's because it allows you to give both sides, and especially in an enemies to lovers book where there's a tension, this tension, and you can leave the heroine in the dark, but the reader's not in the dark, right? Because the reader knows, okay, he was actually, he actually like has a total sympathy for her, even though he's being a jerk right now, or he's starting to fall for her, even though he's not showing it yet. Or some romances are all from the woman's point of view, and I don't like that as much. I like that. I like to have both.
Yeah, man, it was really, really interesting, and I really kind of dig that about this book. Are the rest of your books, this is the only one I've read so far, are the rest of your books written in that style?
Yes, they're all alternating point of view.
Awesome. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask you is, if you were to sort of order your perfect reader out of a catalog, what would the description say? Who is your perfect reader, essentially?
My perfect reader is for lovers of uh, the dominant alpha male and a dominant protective alpha male, and the heroine who brings him to his knees. And again, like I'll go back to like, if maybe not the Cinderella readers, but the Beauty and the Beast readers.
Okay. Okay. Did it start out like that? Is that who you started out to write for?
I have always written very dominant males. I actually started reading historical, and it was because of that, the power difference between male and female in the historical times, allowed for this power play that I enjoyed, messing with. So, and because I like my sex that way, I like the scenarios that way. So I could use the arranged marriage, I could use the abduction, seduction. So I started, medievals, Rome, and Regency were a favorite of mine at first, and then I did a lot of sci-fi because the same thing. You've got the abducted human who has to now, be with the very hot alien, very hot dominant alien. So I've got, and then I also write paranormal. So the shifter, the werewolf shifter, again, he's like more than a regular male. He is paranormal, makes him, extra large, extra strong, extra scary. The power, again, is in that relationship.
So, I hear that at the beginning of this interview, you said that you got a degree in creative writing, right?
Yeah.
So when did you know that you wanted to be a writer? I mean, when was that, or the realization of your affinity for writing, which you obviously have? When did that sort of dawn on you?
It was, really early. Like I was reading chapter books by kindergarten. Like my mom was a school teacher, and so she really instilled that love of reading in me. And by like 8, 9 years old, I was reading like a Nancy Drew book every night, and then I went on to like Agatha Christie. Like I liked mysteries. Yeah, I wasn't a big romance reader until adulthood, but books have always been a part of my life, and I was always told that I was going to be a writer. Like it was, because I always had my nose in a book, it was sort of assumed, that I was going to major in English and somehow pursue literature. And so actually in college I wrote more poetry, but I think I did always know that I would write books for sure.
Do you remember the first story you wrote?
I don't. I mean, I remember I can like in college I remember I won some prizes for short stories, but I'm sure I wrote stories younger. I was writing poetry even by high school, so it must have been much younger. Would be the first like story. Actually, I think there was a ghost. Now that I remember I overused the word suddenly. Like my babysitter was like, "There's a lot of suddenlies in this," and it was about like suddenly the ghost attacked, or I don't know, something.
Awesome. One of the things that I want you to tell folks is you have a way for people to sort of sample more of your writing, and I want you to tell folks about that.
All right. Yes, I would love for them to sign up for my newsletter. My newsletter subscribers get all kinds of free books. So you can sample the paranormal, you can sample the Mafia, you can sample the sci-fi, some of my shorter stories as well. So if you subscribe, you will get all kinds of free books. So please do sign up. And then once you're reading my books, you get the bonus content. So I write, sort of after stories with like, oh, where are these characters now? So you'll get all that fun stuff too.
Yeah, and I have prepared a QR code for folks watching on television right now. All you do is just point your camera phone at the QR code that you see, the little box there, and it will take you to where you could sign up to get all these great freebies from Renee, and pretty easy, and no fuss, no muss. And of course, if you are on a browser, you could just go to subscribepage.com/book lovers. So with that, Renee, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat today. I really love this trailer. If it's okay with you, I'd like to play it one more time as we conclude here. Would that be all right with you?
Yes, I would love that too. Thank you.
Okay, so once again, go over to subscribepage.com/book lovers, or we'll put it up here at the end. But let's check out this this trailer right now. Thank you so much, Renee. I really, really appreciate it. For those watching, this is where you go. Point your camera phone right there at that QR code and get a really, really generous sampling of Renee's books. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Renee. Go grab this great offer.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.